The Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao was built by Frank Gehry and opened to the public in 1997. The story begins in 1991. Thomas Krenz, the director of the Solomon R. Guggenheim Foundation, was looking for a new museum site in Europe. At that time, the American Foundation had several all over the world, the best known being the one in New York designed by Frank Lloyd Wright. In Spain, the president of the autonomous Basque region invited Thomas Krenz to Bilbao, a port that had seen better days. Its factories and shipyards were closing one after the other. It was an unlikely setting for a grand museum. According to legend, it was while he was jogging across the bridge on his run through the city that Thomas Krenz had a revelation. The museum should be just there, on that industrial wasteland, in the middle of the city, on the banks of the river. This site is in the centre of a geocultural triangle. There is the Bellas Artes Museum, the University, and the Opera House. The three main cultural centres of the city are there. The object was to have a building with a strong identity. The museum had to let the inhabitants take their city back. They had to turn their backs on the industrial period and stop fleeing the city as previous generations had done. They needed to get back their civic pride. The museum had to be a monument. The American architect was already celebrated for his strange, deconstructed shapes, but for the museum in Bilbao, he would create a building to match the scale of his ambition, a monumental sculpture with a chaotic, abstract look to it. In fact, the building is more easily read than at first appears. To the south, the dialogue is with the city, stone, right angles, windows aligned. To the north, there is empathy with water, undulations, fluid shapes. When volumes are separated, figurative silhouettes appear. There is a cruise liner, a metal flower with silvered petals, and even a fish with its head and tail chopped off. Fish and their movements have always been part of my architectural vocabulary. I think that it goes back to my childhood. Every Thursday, my grandmother took me to the Jewish market. We bought a live carp and took it home where we put it in the bathtub. I played with the fish all day until my grandmother killed it to make fish balls. The image of the fish appears right away in the very first sketches for the building. The extremely complex building at Bilbao started with semi-automatic writing. Frank Gehry combined the subconsciously drawn pencil sketches with the requirements of the building program. He interpreted his designs into a variety of volumes. His preliminary trial pieces freed him to work like a sculptor standing before his clay. I made ever bigger and bigger models, adding new elements and new pieces to the puzzle. Once I was on the right track and had a pointer to where it might lead, I started to look at the various parts in more detail. They developed in their turn. Then I went back to the rectangular, box-like basis and looked at it. Then I started to change its form until I reached a certain stage where I stopped, because I felt that that was it. A computer program used in aviation design helped to solve the constructional problems. A technician pointed to and digitally recorded 56,000 points on the surface of the model. The cardboard boxes became virtual. The program could calculate the practical feasibility of each mass. It could demystify the forms. A system of metal girders served as the rounded skeleton. Every girder is different, each one made to the specifications given by the computer program. The American architect made a beautiful object as well as a correctly functioning museum. On one side he placed a shop, a cafeteria and an auditorium, and on the other side 20 galleries on 3 floors. He set the offices some way off.